All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Persian and The Cowboy podcast. He's the Persian, I'm the Cowboy. And today we're going to be taking another deep dive into conversations that we're all afraid to have.
Yeah.
And, men's mental health tends to get overlooked quite a bit in today's society. And I think some of it's rightfully so. Too many people are complaining, too many people have their problems, and too many people are talking about their problems. And sometimes we just need to grit and bear our burdens that we have and move forward with the world. So, but it is important to have the conversations between your close friends and to know that you have someone that you can reach out for. So please do not take this episode as a pity party that we're just trying to get out there and get some sympathy votes or anything like that. We are just trying to be an example of two men that are not very in touch with their emotions, trying to express their emotions and learn from each other and be there for each other. So with that being said, Mr. Persian, would you like to kick it off with any opening thoughts?
Yes, sir. First, I would like to say mental health in this country has become the number one. We are in a massive epidemic in this country. Mental health is like multiple things. There's multiple layers to the situation. You have, behavioral issues, you have bipolar disorder, you have depression, you have anxiety, you have anger problems, addiction. Everything is just like, it's like an octopus with multiple tentacles, basically, as my analogy there. You have a lot of people who, are struggling out there, who need help, who cannot communicate about their problems. There are resources out there, but it's not enough. In this country, in the United States, we are not spending enough money, enough manpower, enough resources on this issue with mental health. It just gets completely shoved aside. I know now in this day and age, it's no longer taboo. We can discuss these things in open forums. There's therapy, there's medications, but it's still not enough. There are people out there, many people who are dying from these various diseases within mental health. And it's very sad. You have people of all ages. You have children, you have young adults, you have the elderly, and life has become such a challenge on multiple fronts. And it's the way we deal with those problems that have caused us to, kind of just falter. And I actually would like to talk about this topic, Cowboy, maybe a little long for the next few minutes, but about my experience, if I may.
Yeah, how far back do you want to go? I know you've had your anxiety stuff going on. But
yeah, I think, and I'll kind of summarize this real quick. So I think for me personally as a child, I've had different issues with, mental health. But what happened to me was, as a young child, I had a lot of tendencies for, melancholy after vacations or, the holidays, especially the holidays to this day, I can actually become very emotional when it ends because you have such a huge excitement for the holidays and the decorations and hanging out with the family and the friends. And then when it ends, you fall into this deep kind of depression. For me, it's like a seasonal depression. And I've always had this as a child. There's been moments where I would be very emotional and cry for a few days and then it would go away. And it was up and down, weird thoughts, just anxious thoughts. And then it progressively got worse and worse and worse. And they say mental illness gets really bad for the person that has these various issues. Somebody in their early 20s to mid 20s, late 20s, it gets worse. And if it's not treated, it gets worse and worse and worse as you get older. For me, my first experience that was very life-changing and altering for me was in 2016. I had just gotten married. I purchased my first home the year prior, got married a year prior, and it was a lot of change for me. But I was abusing alcohol quite a bit and drinking. And one night I was actually out with you.
Yeah.
And we were, partying a lot in the local small town that we live in. And I had probably the equivalent of maybe, 5 vodka Red Bulls. And I'm having an upper and a downer at the same time. And I was a big coffee drinker back in the day too. And I was drinking so much coffee. Anyways, the following day, I remember I had this massive, massive panic attack that I've never felt. I thought I was dying in the car when I was driving with my wife to this get-together. And I was shaking. My body was covered in just sweat. And then I was just weird palpitations that I've never had. I didn't go to the hospital, But the 2 months after, the 3 months after that were fucking hell. My body was completely changed, meaning that my emotional state was definitely different. My imbalance, I had like a chemical imbalance or something based off this, just this panic attack. And it was always there, this imbalance, but it got worse. And I was just depressed. I was in a deep, dark depression. Everything was making me depressed. I was not interested in doing things anymore, hanging out with friends. I just wanted to be on the couch. I could barely get up in the morning to shower. I could barely work where I was working at. I was falling asleep because I was just so tired. I had insomnia. And then I didn't know what was happening to me. And I remember I went on a trip with my wife to Portland in November to try to get me out of the spirit. Not a great place to go on a trip when you're depressed because it's the Pacific Northwest. It's cloudy and foggy. We went in November, but I was crying the whole time. And like I couldn't. I remember I had gone to a winery, which was a bad idea because I didn't know what was wrong with me. And I had a couple glasses of wine, and I just remember my poor wife was with me and she was just like, what the fuck's going on with you? Like I was just crying for no reason. I was looking at trees and flowers at the vineyard and I was just crying. And then so I got back, and in December I was doing very poorly. I wanted to avoid taking medication, but I told myself I need fucking help. So I found a great psychiatrist, and we talked for 2 hours, and she diagnosed me with depression, and she put me on medication, and it took me 12 weeks to finally start feeling some relief. But I had extreme anxiety. I was crippled because of the abuse that I was doing with the alcohol and the Red Bull at the same time. And that night triggered a lot of things for me, but it was always within my body. And come to this day, it's actually within my family gene pool. We have several relatives that do suffer from depression and anxiety, and they're on medications. I take an antidepressant. I take 100 milligrams of Zoloft, and it helped me greatly. Thank God for these medications. Thank God for these medications. And I try to live a healthy lifestyle as much as I can, and I try to work out as frequently as possible. I know you're looking at my Diet Coke, but we all have our things, and I try to drink less, alcohol as much as I can, especially the hard alcohol. But I just remember that time I was in a dark place. I remember my wife was afraid to leave me home alone. Yeah. She thought I was going to kill myself. And I had thoughts of suicide. And it's so crazy because these thoughts just come out of nowhere and they just constantly go. They don't leave you. They don't leave you. Like a person who doesn't have this type of issue is not going to think about suicide. Yeah. A person that has an imbalance that their body has completely collapsed, they're going to have these thoughts. And I was in a very bad spot. I was letting people down around me that wanted to hang out with me, and I try to explain the way I felt, and a lot of people couldn't understand because they didn't understand about this or they hadn't experienced it themselves. And later on, a couple of people told me, hey, I know what you mean. I went through something similar. But, if it wasn't for my wife, she helped me tremendously, helped me go to my appointments, helped me, take my medications on time, helped me, go to the doctor and force me out of bed every day, force me to take walks. I lost 40 pounds in 2 months. Damn. I wasn't eating anymore. Damn. Because I said to myself, there's no point to eat anymore. What's the point of all this? Then it became an existential depression. It became like, what's the point of life? What's the point of, the afterlife? What's the point of anything? And that's a very scary place because if you can't get this out of your head or you can't, get help for this, it takes you to a dark place. Yeah. So, from then on, I've become a huge advocate of mental illness, mental health and just like getting help and getting the help that you need. Thank God for these therapists, these psychiatrists, the people around you that are willing to help because there is a light at the end of the tunnel and you will get better. You will get out of this, but you got to keep fighting. Fight like hell because life is a beautiful thing. And a lot of people that commit suicide or a lot of people that die from these things, whether it's suicide, drug abuse, addiction, there is help out there for them. But it's just very sad that, we as a country are spending our money in the wrong places. We have to take care of our people here. And I'm talking about tens of billions of dollars to be spent on something like this. We got to open up the clinics again, the institutions, the mental asylums, you put more money and better research on medications. I mean, for God's sakes, we have fucking things with mushrooms now. I mean, don't quote me on this, but they're doing tests with mushrooms that people have microdosed and they've felt better and they're able to feel good for a year and they have to do it again. Like the things are out there, but there's just such a political pushback on this because of money making and because of fucking pharmaceutical industry trying to push their medications. But there are treatments out there. But again, I'm very thankful for the medication that I take and it's still working for me. But there's a lot of people out there who didn't have to die. They didn't have to commit suicide. But you get in such a dark place, I don't blame them. I don't blame them because you're in such a bad place and the thoughts that you have are horrible thoughts.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at these mass shootings, a lot of them can be avoided with the right treatments for these people. If they had the right treatments, the right medications, and the right people around them, maybe these things wouldn't have happened. It's just, it's a very sad situation. There needs to be tens of billions invested in this because with that kind of money and putting in the right places, the government can make a difference, but they don't want to do it.
Yeah, and there's such a financial incentive to keep the perpetual motion machine that is big pharma moving forward in itself. But do you want to talk about your childhood?
Yeah, I'm going to talk about that too, but I'm going to also talk about something in between. Once you have some sort of mental illness, folks, I just want to be clear, it never goes away. You have to work on it. It's a combination of medication therapy, speech therapy, journaling, but also it's also things that you learn from your therapist, like mental exercises and things like that. It's not just, it's an all-in approach. It's an all-in approach. And you have to work on it. Like, I want to be very clear. I stopped taking my medication a year after that I had gotten better and I was back at it. I was hanging out with friends and doing everything. I was doing well at my new job. And then I thought I had this beat. So I stopped taking my medication with the guidance of a doctor.
Yeah.
And then this shit came back with full force, 10 times worse a month later. Mm-hmm. And then I had to go back on the medication and start the process again.
Yeah.
So it's just, it doesn't leave you, but you have to continuously work on it. It's like being a diabetic. You're going to be a diabetic. It just doesn't go away. You have to take medication. It's like the person with high blood pressure. You're always going to have to take high blood pressure medication.
Well, and modify your diet too.
Modify your diet. But what I'm saying is too, like, it's an all-in approach.
Yeah.
It's a combination of taking your medication, seeking, having a good doctors, a team of doctors, psychiatrists, therapists, and also just, keeping in shape, working out, and also, doing the mental exercises and keeping and surrounding yourself with good people.
Getting rid of those feedback loops is a huge thing.
Yeah.
It's really easy to get in that downward spiral of like, this is equals this, equals this, equals this, and then my life's meaningless and what's the point of anything? And why you bother eating? Yeah.
And the other thing too with my childhood, I have a mother, great lady, has done fantastic, raising me, and also beautiful woman.
Fantastic
Thank you.
Woman.
Thank you very much. Mama Persian. She's done a fantastic job, as much as she could. My sister also helped in that process. We have
immigrated to this country too.
Yeah,
right?
My parents came here in 1976 from Iran, and then they stayed here due to the revolution situation in 78, 79, which I wouldn't have met you if that revolution, I would have went back. But I'm glad it happened because I met you and here we are, best friends, one of my best friends here. But also, to my sister, we have a 10.5-year age gap. She was huge, instrumental in my upbringing. And also my father's brother. He really, you talk about they don't make men like that today. He helped raise me because at an early age, my biological father, who, was in the picture, started having issues. Whether it were mental, I don't know. But, there was a lot of things, infidelity, issues with finances, just not understanding that he's a parent and things like that, and, being a coward, mentality. And eventually my mom, bought him a ticket and said, go back to, the ancestral homeland and restart your life. We don't need you here because you're negative energy for this house. And luckily I had my uncle who was in the area and he helped raise me and to the person that I am today. And I'm very thankful for his leadership, for his mentorship. And he's my, just because you're born, just because you have a father doesn't mean that's your actual father. It's the people that mentor you, and he is not he is my bloodline, but he's not my biological father, but he helped raise me at the age of 5.
Yeah.
And
Well, he saw that his brother was being a shithead, and then
Yeah.
he stepped up and took on his brother's responsibility to
absolutely.
raise you.
He sacrificed his own life, his own plans to help raise me because, my sister was 18 years old, but, and he helped, she was independent, but he's like, dude, this kid's like, such a young age. He needs a father figure because
Yeah.
you can't do it all alone. And there's a lot of shout out to all the single moms and single dads out there that are doing it on their own out
Absolutely,
there.
yeah.
But yeah, to basically summarize it, because it's a lot of different stories, but there was a lot of verbal abuse in the house from my father to my sister and my mother, and also there was a lot of physical abuse that I witnessed at the age of 4 and 5. And it was something that, a lot of homes in the United States can witness because there's a lot of broken homes in this country, which is sad.
Terrible.
But I witnessed things that a lot of children didn't, witness, and it's stuck with me. I have very good memory, and I remember the police coming to our house on several, instances and the domestic violence stuff and, people coming in, and it was very scary. It was scary. I would miss some school days because they were up the whole night fighting, and, he may have had some episodes. Maybe he was struggling with mental illness. I don't know. And back then in the early 90s, it wasn't really as big as it is today. The knowledge on it wasn't big, and I'm not justifying, because even though you struggle with mental illness, it doesn't mean you have to be a complete demon to your family members. You know what I mean? So anyways, that's kind of a brief synopsis.
Do you think that your seasonal depression and your FOMO of when the holiday ends and when those kind of things end had to do with the fact that like this good time was ending and now you're back to the standard home reality that you have growing up where your parents are, having their issues and you're just constantly in that stressed out environment that your father was bringing to the table?
I honestly don't know what it stems from. I think I've always been a kid. When I grew up, I always was a little melancholy. Maybe it's because of the things that I witnessed, and it did, adverse effects to my brain. Because honestly, again, the point of this episode is not to, for a pity party or I'm trying to get attention. We're talking about mental health and things that are seen at a young age. And your brain develops at such a young age. And a lot of it starts developing when you're 4, 5, 6, for how you're going to be later on. So there's a very important years. And if you see a lot of trauma, a lot of images and things like that, it can affect you for the rest of your life. And I'm not blaming that at all, but it's a combination of genetics and environmental factors that, it affects you. But regardless, I just think I've always been somebody who's always had this chemical imbalance, and somebody that just hasn't had the ability to get it corrected at an early age or even in my young adult life. And it's no knock on my uncle or mother, because they didn't know.
Yeah,
I mean, they grew up from our parents' generation. They didn't believe in this stuff.
Yeah.
They didn't really believe like we believe in it. But basically, there was a lot of issues that I saw, and I think it affected me. But also, it's just the holidays are such a beautiful time, and I think the high that you get, it's coming up in 2-3 months, and then it just every weekend there's something going on, and then all of a sudden it's over.
Yeah.
And then when you see like people taking down the decorations and like the Christmas tree element, and you see the Christmas tree on the side of the road, that's just too much for me. It's too much for me.
That and the lack of vitamin D and everything.
The lack of vitamin D,
yeah.
the alcohol, like not back then, but now as an adult too, sometimes it still bothers me. But I think that ultimately that had an effect on me. And there are times where I kind of remember and I will think about it, but then it just goes away. But later on in my adult life, things were starting to get a little worse. They started plunging. Like this imbalance got worse, and I started doing some, not focusing as much, the whole ADD concept there, and then the whole OCD. Like for instance, like big messes bother me. Big messes bother me, and I was like that as a young kid. If something, me, like I have pretty good handwriting, right? And if something was like smudged on a piece of paper or whatever, I would rip up the paper and start over again.
He's got the girliest handwriting I've ever seen. It's fantastic.
Great cursive,
it's really
cursive.
Good.
No one writes in cursive anymore.
I do.
But you do? Okay,
Yeah.
there you go. I love that. I appreciate that.
I got really bored in chemistry class in college, and I taught myself to write in cursive again.
You could do an Etsy account and just like start, making stuff for people, woodwork and do some cursive.
I mean, just because
on
it's
there.
cursive doesn't mean it's legible. So
Hey, You never know. It could be nice. But anyways, yeah, there was a lot of underlying signs and conditions, the OCD, the ADD, and then this whole situation with the, depression too. And then it really burst. The pimple really burst in the early 20s.
Well, and I've always noticed you've had this huge FOMO. You've always been really afraid of missing out on what the group's doing, what's going on with that. And like, you just liked the starlight, being the center of attention, being on the getting the mic and standing up and giving your own little one-man show for us a lot of the time too. And so that's what we like. A lot of what we loved about you is you always cracked us up and we had a great time with it. But I've always kind of wondered if it was like you needed to be out there and you didn't want to miss out on the group environment.
Yeah. Well, I think it was a combination of things. A lot of people that try to, you look at comedians, right? Mm-hmm. Have you noticed all comedians have like dark pasts?
Yeah. Do you see the John Mulaney stuff that just came out recently?
What happened?
Oh, he was like addicted to cocaine and like Xanax and all kinds of pills.
They all have problems.
Yeah. So they're mostly younger children too.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting.
Well, you look at like the Chris Farleys, the Belushis, like you look at Robin Williams too with like his situation. I mean, before he got sick, before he had the disease happen, he had a lot of problems.
Yeah.
Beforehand, depression, anxiety. So, like, I think I stemmed a lot of, like, the whole comedic stuff with that kind of situation, anxiety, depression. Mm-hmm. And, luckily, we're in a time period where they're talking about this stuff now because it's such a problem, because it's a huge epidemic. Like, people were talking about COVID all the time in the last 3 years. We've had a national epidemic of mental illness in this country for decades that just gets ignored. And it's getting worse and worse and worse. I mean, we literally have like every fucking week in this country, we have a mass shooting of some sort. And it's happening everywhere. And then everybody says, oh, it's a gun problem. Actually, it's a mental health problem. And yes, I am not big on guns, as you know, but I do agree with having, I do. If somebody wants to have a gun, I have no problem with the Second Amendment. If they can reform it, that's a whole other topic. If they can reform the Second Amendment, yes, let's go ahead and do it. But there's also a mental health aspect to this too. Mental health is a very, very, very vast and very comprehensive thing. Like, there's so many different issues within mental health that it doesn't get talked about.
Yeah.
And it's just all over.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's almost like we've got rid of all the other problems in life, and now that we're virtually problem-free, we're just creating issues in our mind, and that's what's causing us to go just crazy with it all. It used to be just a daily struggle just to keep living. Like, we used to have to go out and find food and
well, those are the tougher generation.
Yeah, but they got tougher because that was what they
had to do. They had to survive.
It's like the guy that survived jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge, right? As soon as he left the bridge, he knew he made a mistake.
Yeah.
As soon as your life is flashing before your eyes.
Can you believe that? And then he fucking survived with all those broken bones?
Yeah, and they got out of
How
there
the fuck did they pull him out of the water like that?
I don't know, man.
Jesus. And that water is like that's like 30 some odd degrees, 40 degrees. That's cold ass water.
It is, yeah.
So before I ask you about your experiences too, I just wanted to say, I mean, I've had a couple of instances of, sudden, I was in remission. I'm in remission right now. Like I haven't been depressed or anxious. I mean, I've had my moments of, melancholy, whatever the normal amount, but
yeah, it's just standard for,
it's just,
every day can't be a great day.
Yeah. Exactly. But that's why it's just, again, I'm going to just say it one more time. It's very key. If people are listening and watching out there, please, if you are struggling with depression, anxiety, weird thoughts, behavioral issues, there is help for you guys. Please get help. And then we'll put a link on our website too to the suicide prevention hotline and all that on this episode. But there is a light at the end of the tunnel. You will get help and it will get better. But you have to fight. You have to fight because this thing, it will never leave you. But you will get better with the right treatments. But it's underlying and it will be at bay in remission. But it will stick with you. It will stick with you. But fight. Fight like hell.
Yeah, keep fighting.
Keep fighting.
It's worth it.
So, Cowboy, I'm going to ask you, dude, with mental health. So, what are your experiences that you've had with mental health and just some of your whether you've had depression at times or anxiety, or do you have like me, any kind of family history? Like I have family history on both sides with
Yeah.
various things. So take it away.
Not necessarily like a family history about anything. My childhood was very different than yours. My parents were that, like, they're not a perfect couple, but they were kind of perfect for each other kind of
Yeah,
setup.
all the great people, beautiful people.
That and like Disney Channel kind of hyper inflated my standard of what a marriage should look like and everything
Yeah.
like that. So, it was a great childhood growing up with them. Everything was fantastic. Most of my problems were, I'd say, anxiety related, and it more so comes from the dating world and then also school and education.
Yeah.
So I go back to elementary school. So, this, but for those that don't, like when I was 14 months old, I was diagnosed with bilateral retinoblastoma, which is is the third most common childhood cancer. And I'm blind in one eye. I was treated with radiation therapy, but blind in one eye because of that, and grew up with so I think that kind of shocked my family, where it's just like, oh, the only boy and the cancer survivor kid, help keep him precious, kind of thing. And so going to elementary school, starting school, like it was like my learning disabilities became apparent very early on in my education process. And it was just weird for the school system that I had then, because I was quiet. I was very well behaved, but I had no idea what was going on in like first and second grade, just clueless. And my teachers were like, well, he's, sitting and doing good things, and they're worried about these bad kids that are causing all this ruckus. And I'm just sitting there quietly, politely, just listening to directions, but having no clue what the hell is going on. So my early education period was just like making me feel like a complete idiot that had no idea what was going on. They're presenting spelling as if it makes any sense whatsoever. It's it's a completely arbitrary thing that they decided like a couple hundred years ago that this is how all the words are going to be spelled, and we're just going to keep it that way, no matter how pronunciation changes or anything like that. So the teachers come out and present that as like if it's something that makes intuitive sense, and I'm just like, wait a second, this doesn't make any sense at all. So school made me feel stupid. And fast forward to a little bit later on in life, I found out that the way I was treated, the radiation therapy, the left temporal lobe, which I had most of my treatment was right in my temples.
Which is
the left temporal lobe is responsible for like language and some type of memory areas. And I was diagnosed with an unrelated pairing memory problem. So I'm very bad at like getting two things connected together.
Yeah.
So learning a new language is nearly impossible for me. I mean, I can do it. I got through Spanish too. It took me 3 years, but hey, I made it out in high school.
That was a difficult class, by the way. That wasn't easy.
So it wasn't until like halfway through middle school that stuff started connecting, where it wasn't just rote memorization anymore. It was like now we're applying the processes that we've learned to get specific outcomes. So math started clicking for me. And then, science has kind of always made intuitive sense. If I could tangibly hold something and see it happen, then I'll be like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. Ice freeze, it's frozen water. Okay, got it. Yeah. But like trying English and figuring out what a semicolon is was just like a struggle that couldn't be. But so combine that with with school, and then I think I just naturally am predisposed to a little bit more like dating anxiety than the normal person would be. Like I was just a really, really shy kid, and I've gone to great lengths to try to kill that.
I remember you.
Yeah, exactly.
First time I met you, you're like, who the fuck's this guy?
Yeah.
And you were like very shy. But I mean, now, obviously you're not a shy guy.
Yeah, I mean, like I'm very comfortable in who I am now. And
you can hold court.
I've put in the work to become the person I am now, which is this is why I'm not asking for help or anything like that. I'm just talking about my past and my experiences. So it kind of came to a climax in so school started making some sense, but like it came to a climax in college when I was dating a girl, and like all of a sudden it just clicked in me, and I was like, oh my gosh, this woman's incredible. And then I was like, wait a second, like, oh man, she's gonna leave me because I'm this idiot that doesn't know anything.
That's the anxiety.
And it just took over, and I just had this downward spiral. And I was playing a lot of chess at the time, and I love chess. It's an incredible game, but you're always trying to think like 12 moves in advance. And for me, that would just I could just spiral out of control with that. I'd be like, oh, she hasn't texted me back. It must be because of this, this, and this, and then like
That's
go down this
dude.
crazy
Oh my
rabbit
God.
hole. And so
Yeah,
then
yeah,
we're
yeah.
not going to have children together, and we're
That's
going to
the
die.
worst.
And I'm gonna
That's
die
the
alone.
worst, dude. The anxiety is the worst.
Yeah, and so I just keep telling myself these stories in my head, and then I just had like my complete like meltdown. And so then I went to group therapy for a while there in college, and that gave me a lot of perspective. Like, okay, my problems aren't that bad. You know, I'm an okay guy, and you know, college, being in engineering school, like I was barely getting by. That made me feel dumb too. So I
Well,
figured out.
that's not easy.
Yeah, so I figured out in college that like I had an inferiority complex built around my cancer and my childhood of that, and like being the idiot in school all the time just made me feel like I'm like this good, and like any girl that would like me must automatically be way up here. And so I just have this predisposed ability to just drop myself down to that level and be like, but so that was college. So got through that okay, graduated college, and then started dating some more, and was like, okay, getting way more comfortable with who I was. And then, to make a long story short, I started dating a religious girl that we didn't see quite eye to eye, and she was more versed in the Bible than I was at the time. And so she would just come up with like, oh, well, we do this because of this, and this is why this is, and that, and there's that. And then all of a sudden it made me start questioning myself from an angle that I'd never really questioned myself from before. And that was like am I a good person?
Oh, God.
Am I
Yeah.
a good individual in the eyes of God? And that's what really crushed me. So added that to my dating anxiety.
That doesn't help. That doesn't help.
Yeah, so
that's a whole nother realm.
Exactly. So that one really brought me down to my knees, and that's the one that sent me to therapy for like 2 years after that. And I totally came around to it where like the solution for me was to reframe my belief structures, which were not in order. Like so to go way back, so everyone has their core value, right? The thing that they care about most is the thing that is most precious. Like that is their God in life, right? And so I had this idea in my mind that there was this perfect woman out there for me, and we were going to fall madly in love and live happily ever after, right? But that vision of who this perfect woman was unachievable by any woman that's out there. So it was always going to fall a little bit short and cause problems. But I was always projecting that onto the woman that I was trying to date. And
Right.
so the solution wasn't to just calm down or anything like that. It was to realign my values and say that person doesn't exist, and it's okay that that person doesn't exist, and you need to focus on what is really important for you. And to me, that is just telling the truth. And I value courage a lot. I like doing things that I'm afraid of. I really enjoy the rush that comes from that and the learning experience with it. So, and then realizing that I did have an inferiority complex, and I'm actually a lot better of a person than I thought I was and believed myself to be. And graduating college was actually really good for that too, because I was surrounded by all these geniuses down there. And then coming to the real world, I'm like, oh, okay, everyone's not as smart as I thought they are. And like, maybe I'm not as bad at this as, time might tell. So it was just a really interesting experience with that. And it brought me down to my knees and made me reevaluate God, made me reevaluate who I am as a person, and make me really evaluate what role I fulfill in society and what my purpose is in position. So in the end, I think it was a very good thing. I learned to value myself as much as I need to. Another thing was like, you get stuck in those moods of always putting yourself down. And, like I'd call myself a fucking idiot, and I wouldn't call you a fucking idiot. So why am I not treating myself with the same respect that I was doing?
The rule of thumb, the first thing you got to do is you got to love yourself, treat yourself with respect.
Yeah.
Because that becomes a dark place if you don't do that.
Yeah, it definitely is, And so I think, my main pursuit then became just like, what is reality, right? What is real? What is true? And how do I fit into it? And how can I make the world a better place? And so that framing of mind has given me a lot more peace of mind. And like, I don't have to worry so much of what other people think of me. Like, I'm not afraid of what girls think of me anymore. I'm not afraid of what you think of me. We're doing this podcast, which is completely stupid to be talking about all of our deepest, darkest insecurities on the public forum where everyone can just watch.
At the same time, though, you think about it, it's a good thing we're doing it, because maybe this will help somebody that's watching or listening or sees a clip on Instagram or YouTube or whatever, maybe open up about their problems. Be like, shit, I may need some help. I need to go talk to somebody, and maybe I need to start journaling and, get help for my issue.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing.
Yeah. And to me, like, the other things that I use, journaling is extremely well. Playing guitar is something that also.
Yeah, because you're hell of a guy with the guitar. I see you. It helps you.
It helps, release that emotion so it's not pent up so much. Going to the gym, I'm always at the gym, lifting weights, getting tired, rock climbing. And then I love getting perspective on the world. Like, I like to imagine, like, how dark things used to be in the world, and like, oh man, if I was there, like if you and I were in the trenches in World War I, right? And we got the lieutenant over there and he's about to blow the whistle, and we're like, I'm running up the ladder. I
can't imagine that.
Yeah, like I'm running up the ladder first and you're going to be right behind me,
Yeah.
It's like one of us is getting shot for sure.
Oh yeah.
Like it's so, but the men had the courage to go up and do that.
Well, we don't have those. I mean, God bless those people, World War I generation, World War II generation. We don't have that anymore.
Yeah.
We don't have that anymore. I mean, those guys, talk about mental health, the things that they saw. I mean, just look at our courageous men and women in uniform and what they see every day. But you talk about it specifically, the World War I, World War II generation, and Normandy and World War II, what they fucking saw on those beaches and in the trenches. Like, Jesus Christ, man.
Yeah, and so I think getting perspective on life and considering those things. But like also, there was nothing extraordinary about those men. Like, they're still humans. We haven't devolved since then. It's still innate in us. We can access that and bring that to the table.
They were just a tougher generation back in the day. I mean, I'm not saying we're not tough, but those guys, totally different situation.
I think if faced with the same problems, I think we could still step up and do what needs to be done today. So
absolutely.
And thank God we don't have those problems right now, but
knock on wood, we don't.
Yeah, let's keep it safe. So so that's kind of like my process. Just I try to focus on my diet quite a bit, clean that up. I was kind of like, it was kind of a little melancholy day for me, but I had a ton of sugar and like was eating like pancakes and everything
sugar
like that.
And all that becomes an issue.
This whole weekend I ate terribly, and today I'm just like, I don't feel.
Your body's achy. You got stomach pain. Your bowels are not well. But they do say there's a lot of. I mean, there's new studies coming out every day about mental health and the different parts of your body. But one of the key factors, I mean, obviously you have the genetic factor. You have, diet, what you put in your body in food form, liquid form, staying active, just the whole looking at your phone, looking at the screen time, social media.
That's another thing that I think my parents have done that's been wonderful for me is we've spent every year we've gone camping, and
that's beautiful.
And we are outside of cell phone service, no phones allowed. It's just us out in the dirt by a lake with some water. And it's such a, like the first day you're just kind of like, and then you like, just, it all relaxes and you mellow back out with like nature, and the dopamine that you're feeling every single day, it's like a complete detox from it. And then my circadian rhythm lines up with the sun, and I'm able to fall asleep at like 9 o'clock, which is fantastic. Which is
great. That's great sleep.
Yeah, and it's like my mattress is way more comfortable here, but I sleep better up there on that crappy air mattress because I'm just like...
Well, because you're one with nature, and you're like everything's getting aligned, and that's the thing too. It's like, in this situation, like I said, it's a multiple prong approach. I mean, it's when people are in this state, they're struggling, and if things get to the point where they need additional assistance, then not just therapy, but if they need medical assistance, like the medications and just the mental exercises, they always say like the best thing is take a walk and be one with nature for an hour or two. And like when I took my walks outside, when I wasn't able to work out or didn't have the strength to work out, I at least walked. I was walking for miles and just being one, seeing the birds chirp, trees. I know it sounds, a little cliche, but it's the truth.
Stop and smell the roses, right?
It really helps. It really helps. But again, I mean, just to kind of wrap this up, like, it's just such a sad situation that the federal and our state governments don't do enough for mental health. I mean, I'm all about America being involved in the world and world affairs and helping in different causes, but we have to start looking at ourselves and the problems that we have in this country. I mean, we have many different problems, not to get too political, but we have economic, social, infrastructure problems, education, healthcare. But a part of the healthcare, dude, the mental health by itself is a whole topic. We have to invest billions of dollars in this situation.
I don't think that's the right approach because, I mean, look at back to like, how much did we invest in it in 1880 or like, let's there's a trying to quote something that I don't remember completely.
Well, if I could just say one thing real quick,
go ahead.
but and I'm not trying to minimize what people went. I mean, I wasn't alive in the 1800s, 1900s. Like, I'm just saying, like, they had their own problems, their own generational problems. And, you talk about a generation that the World War I, World War II, then you had the Great Depression, in the late 28, 29, and then into the 30s, and then they got out of that. And then you had World War II, then you had the Korean War with the Forgotten War. Then you had the civil rights situation, the country on the brink, and then you had Vietnam. That's a lot of shit for somebody who's born during that time period and is alive and whatever. But and this is a tough generation. But what I'm saying is that we are facing problems that those generations didn't face, and we are facing problems that they faced but we didn't face. And now you have all this technology and like. The daily life has become so difficult. Everything's become so expensive. Everybody's so superficial with the social media aspect. And like now things have become unsafe. People are, killing each other for no fucking reason in the street. Somebody's depressed. They take a AR-15 or a weapon, go into some shopping mall or whatever for no reason. These things happened in the past. We had mass shootings in the past. We've had situations like this that were bizarre, but they weren't on they're becoming more and more and more. And there's a reason why, because we have major societal problems right now.
Yeah.
And this needs intervention before it gets way worse.
Yeah, and I don't think a dollar amount is that correct.
It's not, but they need to get the clinics open up. We need to get the mental health institutions open again. We need to get the clinics. We need to get better medications, better.
Yeah. My fear is just if we threw more money at it, it's just going to be more big pharma pills that are just getting thrown.
Well, not even that. So, I mean, big pharma pills. I mean, if it helps people, why not? But if we can start researching some more, what's the word I'm looking for? Homeopathic or whatever.
Natural remedies. I mean, diet, exercise.
Exercise.
The two best things for. I mean, I've heard studies say that
that's the two best
antidepressants. It's just get your health in order. Stop eating sugar. Stop eating carbs so much.
But sometimes the imbalance is so bad that just because you have an intensive hour workout, you may get relief for an hour or two, but it comes back. Yeah. And that's why things like mushrooms now are being investigated. Things naturally in the ground are being investigated to help with, mental health, and the testing on this is actually being taken seriously. So in the end, there are things that they're trying to work on, but we need a bigger approach, because you have a society that's less depressed, less anxious, less, bipolar and all this kind of stuff. With the right medications and the right research and the right money put in place to help people, you're going to have a much better society in the long run.
Yeah. And I agree. I think another thing to think about is like, I think everyone believes in God, but I don't think a lot of people know what their God that they believe in is. And if we all focus on what we value deepest, the thing that we are the highest believer in, like that becomes our God. So like for example, like if you're a vegan, right, and you think that is the greatest thing that's ever happened and you're just full blown like trying to preach the gospel to everyone, it becomes a religion, and I think that we have now created like being a Democrat is a religion, being a Republican.
Well, that's surpassed religion now.
Well, but some people for them it's a Republican and being a religion, but it's we have all these religions that we've now created in the last 10, 15, 20 years that are not healthy and have not survived the test of time to be there to support us through these struggles. And so that's why I think there's going to be huge backlash. And I think the solution is we are going to become more of a religious society. The people that move forward, the people that have kids, religion is going to church is going to be the way that you rebel against your parents in the next generation.
Well, I think that personally, if you want to practice your faith, freedom of religion, I'm all for it. If you having some sort of faith is a good thing. Believing in something is a good thing, because if you don't believe in anything, then you have a fucking problem. Like, it's going to become problematic for you. But I am also, and I'm not saying that you're not, but I'm just saying the scientific approach too, obviously, like when we have things that obviously we can do now to help combat this, because there wasn't an antidepressant pill, as far as I know, don't quote me, the fact checkers out there, but in 1900, they were fucked. If you had severe clinical depression, you were fucked. Like, you couldn't get out of it for a year, maybe 2 years. But at the same time, now we have the tools to do this, but we're not investing in the right areas. Like, as an example, I support the U.S. intervention in Ukraine, okay? I don't want to see Russia occupy Ukraine. I'm in favor of sending weapons to Ukraine to fight the Russians, okay? However, we've spent tens of billions of dollars. We've now surpassed, $100 billion, $120 billion, and other countries in that region in Europe who should be paying more than us to help combat the Russian threat are not doing that. We could be using some of those billions of dollars, on a monthly basis or annual basis, to be throwing it towards mental health, better resources for mental health for people. If somebody's having a breakdown, putting them in an institution and getting them, going to a clinic and getting them the right medication, doing tests on them to ensure that they're getting better and things like that. I mean, the mental health institutions, as far as I know, they were shut down in the 1980s, and they just threw people in the street. They're like, see you later.
Yeah.
That's not the right way to do it. And then, you talk about mental health. I mean, homelessness is a whole nother topic, but a lot of these people that are homeless, majority of them, 90% of them, have some sort of mental illness that has been untreated, or they're not treating it, and many of them struggle with addiction. And it's getting 10 worse. It's just,
and that's something I think that's a bit different than what the average person going through.
Yeah, that's different. For sure. But it's getting worse and worse.
Yeah, and so it's I don't know, if there wasn't such a problem before, I often think back to like, well, what were they doing then that was being successful for it,
I just think
as far as policy goes, right there. But for me, it's just, I think religion has died. And I think
religion has died. It does. I agree with you.
But religion is something that gave people peace and gave people meaning in their life.
Yeah.
Gave people purpose, It's like, if you're afraid of death, you got to think of things that are more valuable than yourself, so that you have something worth living for.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, the key to salvation and the pathway forward. So I think religion's going to have a huge kickback, and
it's going to have a comeback.
Yeah.
It's going to have a comeback eventually. It'll have its dance again.
Yeah.
It'll come back.
And I think like my message for people is be careful of what your deepest belief is, because that controls you and controls all your decision making that you do moving forward. So if you're aware of what that core belief is, then you can see how it is inflicting itself on your life. And that's something that I had to learn the hard way, is I had to reevaluate what that core belief was and change that belief so that I could live a more prosperous, at peace life.
Yeah. Amen, Cowboy. And I'm just going to wrap up my
I just
want to say one thing too. At the end of the day, when it comes to this whole mental health aspect, I think, in my opinion, I think that the Democrat and the Republican, they have failed on this. It's a societal issue, and they both have failed. Okay. And, if they want this problem to get better, they're going to have to figure it out, and they're going to have to throw money at the problem. I know money is not the solution, but we need more resources. We got big problems in this country, societal problems. I love this country to death. I'm an American. I'll do anything for my country. Push come to shove, I'll do anything. It's the best country in the world still, and no one can get to us. But at the end of the day, we have major fucking problems on multiple fronts, and like any other country, but the mental health situation needs full government attention. You got a lot of people suffering, and it's getting more and more and more. We have, life is very expensive now. You got a lot of problems. You have the broken homes in America, children not growing up with a mother or father. You have a lack of education, lack of healthcare system. You have cost of goods has gone up. You have massive inflation. You have major problems. We're focusing more on world affairs than our own domestic affairs. Maybe America has to take a step back a little bit from the world stage and start prioritizing things at home. I hate saying that because I don't believe in isolationism, but we have to start rebuilding the country from within in different parts: healthcare, education, infrastructure, better research for disease and mental illness. Mental illness on its own is by itself, and it's an epidemic in this country. There are many people suffering. So my message to people is: if you are suffering out there, you are not alone. Please get help. There are still resources out there. Get help. If you are, suicidal, you have behavioral problems, you're just not in the right state of mind, talk to your loved one. Tell them to take you to the hospital, to a doctor. They have to treat you. You can get better. There's a light at the end of the tunnel, and you will get better. But you have to fight for it, and you want it. And it's okay. We talk about these things. I'm a person that has suffered with that shit, and I totally get it. I was scared at first, but when you get help, it's an amazing feeling. That's all I'm going to say.
Amen to that.
Yeah, and then we'll put the link on our website, the suicide prevention hotline,
Absolutely,
all
yeah.
that stuff. But wonderful episode. Thank you for your time, Mr. Cowboy.
Thank you, Mr. Persian.
Ladies and gentlemen, have a wonderful day. God bless you all. Take care. Be safe.
Cheers, y'all.